Pocus. Bienvenidos un sábado más de Pocus. Desde USPED tenemos el gusto de contar con la doctora Yuma Sankar, quien es profesora adjunto de la División de Neumología y Cuidados Críticos Pediátricos en Nueva Delhi, India. Um, Good morning, Dr. Shankar. It's a pleasure to all the team of USPED to have you this, you said it was 7 p.m. right there, right?
Yes.
To have you this day with us, so you could share your knowledge and experience. So welcome, and please, could you start with your session?
Yeah. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me to share my experience with airway ultrasound, and based on the recent research work that we have published in the American Journal of Emergency Medicine. This was basically a postgraduate thesis, which was supervised and conducted in our institute. And we wanted to confirm the endotracheal tube depth in critically ill children. The first disclaimer I would like to say here is that I am an intensivist. So we only do bedside focus, and we are not trained MD in radiology. So this is all part of point of care ultrasound that we do as part of our patient management. And the findings of this study would reflect only a point of care ultrasound techniques that are used in critically ill children. So we basically found an innovative ultrasound technique for assessing the depth of endotracheal tube. And this was very necessary because we have gone through several, we try to look at the literature, and we found that there are no studies which would tell us that you can use ultrasound in all critically ill children. There are studies in newborns and in adults, but there was a lack of studies in children. And ultrasound is a readily available modality, as you all know. And readily we can use it, and of course it has its advantages. So definitely this is applicable clinical in the clinical context very much, and that's why we decided to go ahead with this study. And I have nothing to disclose. So we'll briefly go back to the methods of endotracheal intubation that were available before we conducted this study. Like, what are the ways you confirm endotracheal intubation, and what is the literature on utility of ultrasound to determine tube position and depth. We'll see the evidence in adults and children, and why did we do this particular study, what was the aim of this study, and what were the methods used, tools used, and I'll be sharing the results of our study. As you know, that endotracheal intubation is a vital procedure performed frequently in all ICUs. And successful intubation in first attempt, which has been reported in various studies, is only 60%. Now, in some centers, it can be more than 90. In some, it can be less than 50. But overall, if you see the successful intubation in first attempt, it has been reported to be 60%. And ET tube misplacement is also common. It varies anywhere between 17 to 40%. It leads to significant morbidity because there have been instances when, because of tube misplacement or tube-related adverse events have occurred, and patient has gone into hypoxia, cardiac arrest, or developed atelectasis, and sometimes even death. So it is not a small feat that we do every day routinely in critically ill children. And it is a life-saving procedure, but also if not performed correctly, it can be a life-taking procedure. The methods to confirm ET tube position we all have been using in our bedside. Our clinical assessment, you know that chest is expanding well and saturations are improving. The tube is in place. You can also see the ETCO2, which is the recommended method by the American Heart Association. Chest X-ray, of course, is the gold standard to confirm ET tube position, and there has been no other gold standard after chest X-ray. Of course, fiber optic bronchoscopy, but we wouldn't need to do that when we can do a simple chest X-ray. And now coming up is the ultrasound, because chest X-ray takes some time to get an X-ray done in our setup, particularly in the LMIC settings. And ultrasound machine is readily available in most of the ICUs in the tertiary care centers, even in the low and middle income countries. So it seems to be a very feasible option in our setup. The 2010 or 2020 ACLS guidelines said quantitative waveform capnography was best method, but still it could not determine the ET tube depth. And so we were left with chest X-ray. And as I told you, that chest X-ray has its own pitfalls. So USG is definitely an emerging modality, and we wanted to study the utility of this ultrasound to determine the ET tube depth in children. So these are some of the studies which I'm showing in these slides. And these two studies were in adults, and they found that accuracy of the ultrasound of the airway was very good. And in both of these studies, they reported that it was feasible to confirm the ET tube position depth, ET tube depth by ultrasound, and it had very good sensitivity and specificity. Subsequently, many studies in newborns have been conducted from 2007 to 2016, some in children and some exclusively in newborns. And in most of these studies, they have compared ultrasound with the X-ray, and they have reported the sensitivity and specificity. But in this early study, you can see, even though it's between 1 to 17 years, they only wanted to see if the tube is placed correctly. The depth, what was the depth of the insertion, was not studied. Similarly, in the study on newborns in 2015, the authors concluded that USG was feasible imaging modality, and it could determine the tube position, whether it was too deep or not. But again, they did not comment on whether the tube was placed quite high or not. They only commented on the depth of the deep position of the ET tube. Then there was this study again by Najib et al. In 2016. They also confirmed that ultrasound was good and accurate for determination of ET tube tip to carina in infants. So again, you can see that these were mostly done in newborns. Tesaro et al. Did this very nice study between 3 months to 18 years in 2014. He was one of the earliest researcher to report on the sensitivity specificity of ultrasound using this saline inflated ET cuff. He devised a new method, and he wanted to see how we can visualize the endotracheal tube using ultrasound. So instead of air, he realized that we could do it with saline, and by putting it in the suprasternal notch, the probe, you can get an accurate and rapid method of confirming ET tube insertion. So he gave the suprasternal notch methods called the SS method. Then we have Lin et al. In a systematic review they conducted in 460 patients. This was again pediatric patients less than 18. They suggested that bedside ultrasound was feasible and could be useful as an adjunct tool in confirming ET tube placement in critically ill patients. However, there is paucity of data in children. So all the studies we saw were in adults and 2 in newborns. Even though the systematic review took up to 18 years, the numbers were very small in the beyond the newborn period to 18 years. And we know that pediatric airway is growing and it is different. We cannot extrapolate neonatal studies or studies in adults to this group of children. And chest X-ray is cumbersome, time consuming, involves so much of radiation, and you need to reposition. Every time the X-ray person comes, you have to be there and you have to reposition. Many times the lines get displaced, or the tube gets displaced, or any of these adverse events happen because of repositioning. The patients decompensate, they become hypoxic, they become hypotensive. So these are the ill effects of doing chest X-ray. And ultrasound it's a rapid, easily accessible method. safe and portable and should be routinely used. That's what we feel after seeing the utility of ultrasound in our group of patients. There are limited studies on the usefulness of ultrasound in determining ET tube depth in emergency and ICU setting. If you look at the literature, there's very little data. Therefore, our aim was to assess the diagnostic accuracy of the three different airway ultrasound methods in assessing the depth of the ET tube placement. We wanted to see not the position of the ET tube, whether the ET tube is placed correctly or not. We wanted to go beyond it and we wanted to see the depth of the ET tube placement. Where is it actually placed within the trachea? And therefore, the primary outcome was endotracheal tube depth as estimated by three different. Initially, when we set out to do the study, we thought we would be doing only two methods. But when we started doing the study, we discovered a third method, which I will be discussing in detail. So the primary objective was to evaluate the diagnostic performance of this point of care ultrasound of the airway in confirming the correct position of the ET tube. Not only position, the correct depth of the endotracheal tube intubation in critically ill children. And secondary objectives, we wanted to study, initially this was the secondary objective, but then we combined all the three methods and it was one of the primary objectives to study the utility of cricoid as a landmark. From there came the cricoid to cuff distance. That was the innovative method that we discovered. And to study the feasibility of determining the ET tube cuff to aortic arch and whether we can really see the aortic arch, and that was the method which we first thought we would be doing, but we could not visualize the aortic arch, and it led to the innovation of the second method. And we also wanted to compare the adverse events related to the ultrasound and chest X-ray. So accordingly, we wanted to see the sensitivity, specificity, the PPV and the NPV and the likelihood ratios, and also the diagnostic odds of these ultrasound methods as compared to X-ray. And it was the same for the secondary outcomes. Adverse events included displacement or child having a cardiac arrest, child going into hypotension, or any of the adverse events that we see with ultrasound. It was a prospective observation and study conducted in our ICU over a 2-year period. And children 2 months to 17 years undergoing ET endotracheal intubation were eligible. And those who had a difficult airway, like if an experienced provider is not able to intubate the patient in the normal proposed time frame, then we consider it as a difficult airway. So any child with difficult airway, we did not enroll that patient into our study. Or children who were too unstable and we thought that they may not make it after the first 24 hours. So even those children we could not enroll. And any congenital airway anomaly which was already known or diagnosed were excluded. Of course, if parents refused to give consent, we had to exclude them. And we took a verbal consent first and then we took the written consent because we wanted to do the procedure within the first hour of placing the endotracheal tube. But in all the patients, we could get a written consent. Once the ET tube was in place, we could get the consent to do the ultrasound. It was not difficult. USG neck technique, I will not go into the details. All of you are practicing anesthesia, ICU. You must be having a point of care ultrasound machine. We have the same. We have a Philips CX50 ultrasound machine, and it's a very good machine. And the resident was trained for 2 months with a radiologist. And once she was comfortable and she was confident, and the inter-rater reliability was excellent, she started enrollment of the cases. All the ultrasounds were performed and recorded, and interpretation was confirmed with the radiologist. After intubation by the standard procedure, initially the linear transducer was placed transversely, and the tracheal position is confirmed by seeing an echogenic double line, which I'll show you in the next slide. That signifies the anterior wall of the ET tube. And you can also see a comet tail artifact. But if you see a double track sign, that means it's an esophageal intubation. Luckily, we did not see any patient having esophageal intubation in our study cohort. I'll just show you the pictures before I go to the method. So this is the, you can see these two lines here, the white lines. This is the endotracheal tube that you can see. And this is the saline filled cuff. I'll come to it. I just wanted to show you that the echogenic double line that you see is of the endotracheal tube. And in the method 1, which is called the USG suprasternal method or SS method, which I'll be referring to for the rest of the presentation, after confirming the tracheal tube position, ET tube was inflated with normal saline or dextrose, and linear transducer was placed in a transverse direction perpendicular to the anterior neck. So the position of the probe was transverse, or you can say perpendicular to the anterior neck at the level of the sternal notch. The correct position of the ET tube was visualization of the saline filled cuff as suprasternal notch. Now you can see this donut shaped picture here. This is the saline that you can see, and this donut is the cuff which is filled with the saline. And you can see the echogenic lines of the endotracheal tube. This is a hypoechoic structure which you can see, and you can also see some deep tissues underneath. And here you are putting it in a transverse view, the linear transducer. In the method 2, or the ultrasound cricoid method, so this was the innovation, and how it happened or how it came up, I would like to share here. We initially did a pilot study to see to visualize the aortic arch and try to see the distance or the correlation between the aortic, or how to identify the correct position in comparison to the aortic arch. We took the aortic arch based on previous studies. They have reported that you can see the position and you can confirm the position relative to the aortic arch. So we tried to see the aortic arch in these patients, but we were not able to reliably visualize the aortic arch and ET tube tip or fluid filled cuff in the same plane. It was a logistic problem because the children are small, they have very small necks. And even the radiologist, we had a trial with the radiologist and we were not able to see in all patients, and it was difficult. So therefore, we explored the next best thing that we could see. The next best anatomical landmark was cricoid. Here, in this method, we place the probe longitudinally. In the previous one, it was transverse. Here, it is longitudinal. And when you place the probe longitudinally, you can see the cricoid cartilage, and you can see the saline distal water-filled cuff in the same plane. I'll show you the picture. And the distance between the distal margin of cricoid and proximal margin of this cuff is measured. So how is this done? I'll show you. Now this is the ET tube, you can see. And here is the cricoid. This is the cricoid. And here, this is the saline filled cuff. You can see that the ET tube was visualized here and it's gone in between, and it is again visualized here. So basically, we are measuring the cricoid to the cuff distance, the proximal, the part where the saline filled cuff is seen. So you measure between the cricoid and the saline filled cuff. So that is the cricoid. And this is a saline filled cuff, and these are the cartilages, the tracheal cartilages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is the cricoid to cuff distance, which we measured from here to you can see from the point where the saline filled cuff or the image of the trachea is disappearing. That is the point you have to take and you have to measure. So this is how it is done, and you can see the double line which is seen throughout here. Now, apart from this method, we also saw in the same plane, I showed you the tracheal cartilages. So in the same plane, we also saw position of the fluid filled cuff in relation to the tracheal rings, and this is called the USG-TR method, referred to as USG-TR method henceforth. And as I showed you already, these are the tracheal cartilages, and we wanted to see the relation between the tracheal cartilage and where the ET tube, the saline filled cuff is. So it has to be accurately placed between second and fourth vertebra in children. So that will denote that the ET tube depth is accurate. The chest X-ray was a routine procedure which is routinely done in all our patients. It was a portable chest X-ray taken in the AP view, and thoracic vertebrae were selected as anatomic markers on X-ray. And the appropriate position we defined on chest X-ray based on our practice and previous literature was between T1 and T3 vertebrae. This is the chest X-ray which is showing you the tip of the endotracheal tube. And here you can see it's at the margin of, upper margin of T3, so it's in the correct place. Here you can see the ET tube is much higher than the T1 vertebra. It's in fact at the C6 level. So it means that it is in an inaccurate position. Here you can see that the ET tube is almost touching the carina, and it is at the level of T5. So again, this indicates a too deep. This is a too high and this is a too deep position. And now I would like to share the results. We screened a total of 325 children who required office 220, almost 2/3 required intubation, and but we had to exclude 158 because many were unstable. They had or met one of the exclusion criteria, and they were enrolled and ultrasound was done in 62 patients. By suprasternal method, we could actually do the suprasternal method in all patients, but only in 36 or 52, it could identify the endotracheal tube correctly on ultrasound. So it didn't work well in our patients. The cricoid cuff distance method could be measured in 53 children. We could not measure in 9 children because we were not able to estimate the saline filled cuff, visualize saline filled cuff properly, or the proximal margin of the saline filled cuff properly, because we had to accurately measure the distance. So we excluded those children. And tracheal ring method we could perform again we could visualize in almost all the patients. In 2 patients it was too high, in one it was too high, and in one it was too low, so too deep, so it could not be visualized. And in almost all the patients it correctly identified, the ultrasound correctly identified the tube position and the depth. So this is the baseline characteristics. You can see that our median age is somewhere around 8 years, and most were boys, and they were malnourished, some of them, and some were severely malnourished. Our predominant population comprises of sepsis, septic shock, neurologic illness. Indication for intubation in our population in this particular study was neurological illness and sepsis and respiratory failure. So these were the 2 common indications for intubation of these patients. And in X-ray, almost 55% had some pathology or the other. And in indication for intubation, as I already shared, was mostly neurological. And our residents are quite skilled, so the number of attempts were within the first attempt, most were intubated. And duration of ventilation was routine, like 6.5 to 7 days, and ICU stay also in these patients was 9 to 10 days. Overall survival was 60%, as our in ICU mortality because of the sickness is sometimes 30%, sometimes 40%, varies between 30 and 40. Now, these are the ET tube sizes which we have used, and I want to show you this table and their fixation lengths. So if you pay attention to this table, you can see that if the endotracheal tube size 3.5 was fixed at almost 10, 4 was fixed at 12. So these are the lengths. So if you do a simple calculation, you can see that almost 3 times the tube size and the length was, if you fix the tube at almost 3 times the length of the internal diameter, you are almost in the correct, the depth is almost correct. So this is just a eyeballing of the data that we have, and the majority were, between 4 years and uh, 4 years and 12 years, and there are very few infants. Now, if you look at the volume of saline which we have used in our study, it varied from 1.5 to 8. Now, again, we could see a pattern here, and we could see that in the 3.5 to 4.5 ET tube size, the volumes were less. 1.5 to 2.5 ml only was sufficient. But as the child was bigger and the tube size increased from 5 onwards, it was almost the same amount as the internal diameter of the tube. So, like roughly, if it is a 5 size tube, you would have to push in 3 to 5 ml of saline. So, you can remember this as a rough guide to how much saline would be required to visualize the tube. And now, coming to the results, this is a comparison of ET tube by this first method. Now, the first method was given by Tesaro et al., which I already highlighted in the review, that Tesaro et al. Found this method to be very good. But unfortunately, in our patients, we found that only the sensitivity was only 71%, and specificity was very good. But it could only visualize, concordance was only 46, only 74%. So it was not very good in our setup, and 60% patients only we could identify by ultrasound and X-ray both. And so this was, even though the area under curve was good, the sensitivity was not very good in our patient population. The second method was to estimate the cricoid to cuff distance. So we measured the distances, and then we plotted. We wanted to see which is the best cutoff to determine whether your tube depth is appropriate or not. And we saw that the CC distance, cricoid to cuff distance, this has of 0.74, had a very good area under curve, and it had very good sensitivity, very good specificity, and positive and negative predictive values. And therefore, this is a good method, but we could do only in 53 patients. Again, so feasibility may be an issue in this, but nevertheless, 53 is a good number, almost 85 patients. So if you are not confident with one method, you can definitely go for the to check with the second method, that is the cricoid cuff. And here I would like to highlight that 0.7 centimeter was we found by the Yoden index, that which particular cutoff has the best sensitivity and specificity. Now this 0.74 varied between the age groups. In infants, we couldn't estimate because only 2 patients were there, 2 or 3. So whatever 0.74 centimeter was beyond infancy, between 2 to 5 years. And between 5 to 10 years, the cutoff was little higher. It was 1 centimeter. Similarly, between 11 and 17 years, it again became less. It was around 0.9 centimeter. So it varied between 0.74 to 1 centimeter. What does this mean, this 0.74 centimeter? It means that if your cricoid to the cuff distance is within the 0.74 centimeter, that means your tube is in place. If it is beyond or below beyond, it's going, the distance you're measuring is 0.8, 0.9 or 1 or 1.2, that means your tube is too deep. So in this paper, which I would like you to read, all of you, we have also given the age-wise cutoff. So you can see, based on the age-wise cutoff, you can decide whether it is too deep or it is, it's correct. And if it is too high, the distance would be 0.4, 0.3, 0.5, up to 0.5, 0.6. So that would mean that the tube is too high. We don't want the tube to be too high or too low. We want it to be between 7.4 and 1 centimeter, the cricoid to cuff distance. Now, So this is what I showed you previously. This was the area under curve, which was very good again. And all the three methods had very good performance, and only sensitivity varied between the methods. Now the third method, the tracheal ring method, it was, as I told you, we could do in 60 patients correctly, and it identified in more than 98%, it identified the position correctly. So concordance was very good. It was 0.96. And we could not identify, individually categorize the X-ray because numbers were small in, we wanted to see between the age groups, less than 1 year, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10. But there were very small numbers in some of these age groups. So we could not individually see the relation in these age groups. But overall, when we saw, this is what we found. And in the TR method, 98% of correct position on X-ray were correctly classified. So there was very good concordance and agreement between the X-ray and ultrasound categories between the first and the third tracheal rings, which I already highlighted, that in the TR method, you should be able to see the saline filled cuff between the T1 and the T3, between the first and the third tracheal rings. And if you can see between the first and third tracheal ring, it is very good. And the agreement was very good, 0.87. Here I would like to highlight that we also saw that one patient had the cuff was sitting at T4, at the fourth tracheal ring. In that, even in X-ray, the position was little deep. Now we are concerned if the tube is too high up or too deep, because it can cause mucosal injury and it can cause other adverse events. This aspect has to be looked at further, that what is happening when the tube is placed too deep inside, how much of injury is happening and what are the effects because of that. So that needs further evaluation. So that's why we wanted to avoid going beyond T4 in these patients. And also we have to keep in mind that in some children, if the why T4 is going deep is because the neck is short in children. So up to T3, it is in the correct place. As soon as you go to T4, it goes too deep. And if you go to T1 or just at the level of T1, it goes too high. So we have a very narrow window in children. So that is why it becomes very tricky, and you have to keep it between the T2 and T3 cartilages. We did not find any cuff rupture, or we just needed to manipulate in some of these patients because some had too high or too deep and some needed to be re-intubated. There were no accidental extubations, and at intubation there was only one patient who had this thing and who was immediately revived, and it was not related to the intubation. The child was quite sick. Cuff occurred in 30% of the patients. It was the most common phenomena that we noted whenever we intubated these patients. So the limitations, so having seen that of the three methods, you have seen that the tracheal ring method had the best sensitivity specificity as compared to the other two. But the other two, the cricoid cuff is a new method. You can measure exactly and you can see whether your tube depth is correct or not. However, our study has some limitations. The longitudinal view with the linear transducer offered better visualization. And that is in the second method. But it is difficult to use in smaller children. We found these are all practical difficulties. You take the linear probe and if you try to put it longitudinally, the neck is so small it doesn't. We need smaller probes. So we need more innovation in ultrasound probes. And non-availability of a smaller size probe can lead to inadequate sagittal images. And of course, in unstable patients, we would not like to manipulate the neck too much. And therefore, it's still not advisable to do this method or procedure. But if you see practically, even if you do an X-ray in an unstable patient, the patient is likely to deteriorate. So if you can do in a controlled way and take care and take all the precautions, I think ultrasound can be done even in, this can be explored in the sickest of patients. So the highlights of this particular work are chest X-ray, the current gold standard for confirming correct ET tube position, is unsafe, and that is why we decided to conduct this study, because ultrasound was safer, faster to obtain, easily accessible, and it was a cross-sectional study in 62 patients. And because of COVID, we had to decrease the sample size. Initially, it was 120, but we could not enroll because the patient numbers were small. And three techniques of ultrasound were compared: the suprasternal, cricoid, and tracheal ring method. And we found ultrasound, it reliably confirmed the ET tube depth. The tracheal ring method had the best diagnostic accuracy. So in conclusion, utility of ultrasound as a means for determining correct position depends on the method of USG chosen. And here I would like to highlight that if you are unable to get a window in one of the methods, you should always go and try for the other two methods, and you may find success over there. The suprasternal method showed poor sensitivity. I would not say poor, it was moderate sensitivity but high specificity. The tracheal ring method showed good concordance between all three positions, whether it was high, deep, or low. So you can, it's very easy to do that method also. And provided the neck, you can position the probe properly. And larger sample size is needed for further validation or evaluation of the method that we have proposed in this study. So thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge my institute.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Really nice presentation, really interesting, very useful in our PICUs with our patients. I've read something about ETT position, but in neonates, not in other group of patients, which is really interesting and surprising to me. Again, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience and also your time with us. I'm sure that from now on, whenever it's possible, we'll be adjusting our ETT from T1 to T3.
Sure.
Yes, it's a great lecture. We'll be reading more about these procedures, and we'll share in our group your paper, which really is impressive. Thank you, Dr. Shankar, for sharing us this
we can take up some
great.
Questions. Yeah, we can take up some questions from the participants. If there are any,
Yes.
they could ask some questions.
Ok. Me comenta la doctora si alguien tiene algún comentario o alguna pregunta. Adelante. In terms of the number of procedures to make it true, or to give it relevance to the procedure, how many procedures your residents have done to say it's reliable?
Yeah, so when before she started the study, she did it in almost 10 patients.
10 patients, 10 procedures. Yeah. Okay.
10 patients, and then she along with the radiologist, they confirmed the findings.
Mm-hmm.
And we did an inter-rater agreement, and it was excellent. It was more than 80.
Okay.
40.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
And we also had a senior resident look at the do the same for the same patients after the study was over. We also made a senior resident do for 10 patients. Okay. Along with the student, and he could do and he could identify in the same way as the student. Okay. So it is doable, it is feasible. We have to start doing it.
Okay, excellent. Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, well, thank you again, doctor. There are no more questions. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
Pues, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Wait a minute. Doctor, thank you very much for your time and your experience to share with us. It's impressive, it's brilliant work. Congratulations to you and for your team too. Thank you so very much for your time and your work. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias por su atención. Excelente tema. Estaremos compartiendo el trabajo de la doctora en breve en el grupo. Pues que tengan un excelente sábado. Gracias.